I believe we may indeed be live. Hopefully, we are live. Welcome to North of Collapse, episode 1 of our live series. And we are experiencing a situation in which it appears that the East Bloc of Parliament Hill is on lockdown. And from the very limited information that is currently coming out, this appears to be a result of a barricade situation near the Prime Minister's office. Now, taking a look at the information we have, which apparently broke at about 3 or 4 Eastern, it's currently 6:54 in the East, which is 4:54 p.m. Here in the mountains. We have absolutely no transparency on what is going on from the Ottawa Police Service, OPS, or from Parliament Protective Services. As of 3 p.m. Eastern, the police stated that there are no known injuries, and police continue to deal with an individual in this ongoing incident that just began before 3 p.m. Eastern. And members of the public are being asked to avoid the area and to follow officers' directions. Road closures from Wellington Street, which runs in front of Parliament Hill, and from Bank Street to Sussex Drive. There's apparently been a robot brought in to deal with the situation, and there is a large police truck that may or may not be a Bearcat. It's difficult to ID based on the visual alone. And the last element that we have of this is that there is a lockdown alert for government employees issued for 111 Wellington Street, which is also known as the East Bloc, and this was sent to staffers on Parliament Hill, who were told to seek shelter in the closest room. It went on to say, quote, "If you are not in the immediate area, stay away until further notice. Do not travel to locations under lockdown. Wait for further instructions from first responders." Now, this is obviously an ongoing situation, but that is not quite the point of why we're talking about it here on North of Collapse today. The reason we're discussing this is that it is demonstrative of the broader patterns of opacity and the lack of transparency provided by the federal government. Here at North of Collapse, we have the Echo 12B and Section 69 projects. We are in the process of live documenting institutional failures to follow this country's privacy laws in relation to disclosure. From the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to the Development Bank of Canada to the RCMP to Department of National Defense, what we are seeing is pervasive and almost non-stop attempt to obfuscate lawful Privacy Act requests and ATIP requests, access to information. And the reason we're going live today to talk about this is that I strongly feel, from an informational point of view, that the complete lack of transparency being provided by Ottawa Police in relation to the ongoing situation, is emblematic of this broader pattern of non-existent transparency that is present within the Canadian bureaucratic state. Put another way, and we've written about this over at Prime Rogue Inc. On the Schmittian exception, and I'll drop a link into the comments if I can load it up. Let's see if we can get this or not. Maybe not, because we need to restart the server. Is that right? It seems to be right. But let's give a little lecture on Carl Schmitt and the concept of the exception, and why we believe it is problematically being applied in Ottawa today. Carl Schmitt was I hate to say it, this is a bad opening way to describe him, was a Nazi legal theorist. He wasn't an actual Nazi, but he was a member of the Nazi Party. In recent years, notably in relation to government surveillance and other illegal scrutiny, he's developed something of a legal and international relations scholarship cottage industry surrounding his work. But the basis of Schmitt's work can be described as the quote from page 4 of Political Theology, where he writes that sovereign is he who decides upon the exception. Now, the notion of sovereign is he who decides upon the exception is a complex and multifaceted sentence. It explores the notion that sovereignty is not the day-to-day administration of the state as being undertaken by the bureaucratic class, but rather that sovereignty manifests itself in the context of emergencies. That is to say, that sovereign is he who decides upon the exception, in that the sovereign decides when there is an exception to the normal processes of governmentality and what should be done in this as it pertains to extra constitutional or otherwise not necessarily illegal, but atypical measures. Now, Schmitt was writing a justificatory theory for the Third Reich, which is in and of itself deeply problematic. But the underlying reality of this is it has significant implications for situations like those which are ongoing today on Parliament Hill. And the reasoning underlying this is when we see such an abject lack of transparency from the federal government, well, the federal and provincial and municipal government in this case, Parliament Protective Services, as well as Ottawa Police, a refusal to even inform the public about any of the substance of what's going on, this is an assertion of unilateral sovereignty rather than serving the public. The rationale for this statement is tied to the broader fact that the situation is contained to a single building. Forces are on the scene. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever why information should not be transparently shared by these comms teams who are clearly monitoring social media in real time, as is the case with the Business Development Bank of Canada, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and most other entities of the federal government. In fact, over at Echo 12B, where we are completing a complete and full privacy audit of records being held by the federal government, what we're noticing is a very disturbing pattern of governmental surveillance of ATIP and Privacy Act requesters, wherein once tasked to look for records to retrieve, we are in fact noticing that we're seeing LinkedIn visits from bureaucrats with very poor operational security who are not even bothering to put their profiles on anonymous. And what you might think that's nothing, but remember, a Privacy Act request is a request to see what the government holds on you and is supposed to be handled with the utmost discretion. Tasking is supposed to be limited to individuals who need to know. And guess what? LinkedIn is not a governmental database that is under the subject of any Canadian federal authority. Now, the really interesting part about this is once you see that interesting visit from a government official, we had 3 of them from Transport Canada, 1 from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, 1 from the Business Development Bank of Canada, I believe 1 from the National NSERC, the National something Council. They fund science. And others, is that bureaucrats think they have the ultimate impunity to simply snoop on people who are making Privacy Act requests when this falls completely outside of their remit and of their tasking. And now this is an incredibly troubling development because of the fact that in a context where Section 2 and 3 of the Charter, as well as Sections 4, 7, and 8 of the Privacy Act request, guarantee things like the fundamental right to expression, free expression, as well as protections of the individual making a Privacy Act request in relation to their own privacy not being violated by the process of a request. What we're seeing is frequent and consistent government abuse of this component vis-a-vis ordinary bureaucrats who are returning to the work of Carl Schmitt, declaring an almost sovereign exception in the context of a regular citizen, and regular citizen, albeit backed by a private intelligence apparatus, making Privacy Act requests on their own behalf as part of an investigative project, and also just sheer intellectual curiosity. And this chilling effect doctrine, the notion that an ordinary requester will experience scrutiny and surveillance, is emblematic of the broader state of exceptionalism that is present in the context of the Canadian bureaucratic class. Now, remember, we're in a caretaker period of government. where Mark Carney dissolved the parliament, and essentially, in such a context, bureaucracies don't have adult supervision. The Privy Council is theoretically and constitutionally tasked with mandating oversight of government, and absent a literal national emergency, which would be a Schmittian state of exception, they quite simply, ministers don't have the permission to make new policy. So what we're seeing is policy being made by bureaucrats for bureaucrats without any meaningful supervision. And how does this tie back to the ongoing incident in Ottawa? Well, there's a clear public need to know regarding what's going on at our own parliament. There is no operational security justification for not providing the public with information regarding an individual who is barricaded and isolated to a single building while there is a bomb robot, or ostensibly a robot of some sort, which is presumably for bomb diffusion, and a Bearcat on the scene, indicating that we have a tactical response of some sort, whether negotiatory or kinetic, ongoing in real time. So why did I come online live as part of North of Collapse to discuss this? It's because it's analogous to the broader abuse of bureaucratic power that we're seeing in Canada right now, and the reality of the fact that at this moment, while we are under threat by the United States, by a deranged lunatic who has not only launched the most insane, and I use that word deliberately because it makes no sense, tariff war in modern history, but has also threatened to annex our country, we're letting bureaucrats who have no instinct other than self-preservation to make policy during a time of extreme uncertainty regarding our economic and security future, the defense of this country, to which us as patriotic Canadians have an absolute right to participate and right to know. And that is why the Echo 12B, Section 69, and North of Collapse projects exist here at Prime Rogue Inc., a Calgary-based private intelligence firm, because of the reality that the Canadian bureaucratic class is endangering Canada. While the most significant external vector of threat is most certainly the Trump administration and the government of the United States of America, mind you, secondary threat vectors like Russia persist as being significant, the principal point of vulnerability and failure within Canadian democracy is the bureaucracy in Ottawa. And now this is not partisan or ideological. I don't have partisan beliefs. I am a pragmatist. I don't believe in left or right or center. I may have in the past had some libertarian tendencies and some left-leaning social beliefs, but I don't hold political beliefs anymore. I'm not saying that I'm post-political, but I'm damn close. What I'm saying is that the inertia and the quasi-sovereign self-justification of the Canadian bureaucratic state, and I'm not going to drop terms like deep state or anything like that, that these entities are the biggest vulnerability that Canada has, because their sole purpose is self-protection, self-institutionalization, and bureaucratic gaslighting of the Canadian public. And if we're in a situation where we are located north of collapse, north of an empire that is in the process of imploding from inside because of inept, shall we say, leadership, all the while being threatened from outside, and we're talking about America here, from China and Russia, in the context of hegemonic transition that we all know to be ongoing, the threat to Canadian democracy is being spiked by the people who are meant to protect our interests through these bureaucratic structures. And again, how does this apply to Ottawa Police and Parliament Protective Services? It applies based on the sole fact that they are not issuing transparent public informational content in a manner that is consistent with the exigencies of the circumstances. Rather, we are seeing abstract and localized reporting to the citizens of Ottawa, and by proxy to the citizens of Canada more broadly via the CBC, and we are seeing vague alerts that don't even inform those who are sheltering in place about the specific nature of the threat they are facing, which in the context of containment is completely unacceptable and completely inappropriate, because such information would help those who are in place to make informed decisions about their responses and reactions. And we see this on a daily basis, from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission on Friday approving the new Ontarian small modular reactor program, to the Business Development Bank of Canada essentially deciding to completely cut all intellectual property protections for startups and instead go to post VC firms. What we're seeing in this context of caretaker government in Canada is the creation of small sovereign cells within the federal bureaucracy that do not serve the public in any meaningful way, and which in some cases appear to have been made because of the inertial nature of the cabinet caretaker period under the Privy Council. In other words, these bureaucratic silos are pumping out the, pardon my language, shit that they might not be able to directly pump out with full cabinet control or full cabinet confidence. Now, are they going to try to redact this on the basis of Section 69, which is the cabinet confidence response to ATIP requests? Absolutely, even if there's no cabinet in place. And that is the, well, shall I say, the proverbial human centipede of Canadian bureaucratic governance. Aside from regulatory capture and the desire to remain opaque, and we'll get into this in more detail in a future stream, and you can check out our website at Prime Rogue Inc. If you want to get a bit of information about our doctrine. And I just log in on the wrong channel. I have no idea. I might be on the wrong channel, which would be hilarious. But at the end of the day, the point of what I'm saying is that we are in a situation where pretext is being generated by the bureaucratic class, by the clerical class as we call them here on North of Collapse, to purposefully obfuscate the public. And what we're seeing is that happening in real time on the East Bloc in Parliament. To obfuscate the public, to deny the public the knowledge that they are entitled to via the Charter, via the Privacy Act. And we are seeing circles of bureaucratic layering, emblematic of what Schmitt would have referred to as exceptionality, except being self-defined in nature, that is a fundamental threat to Canadian democracy in a context where we are under patterns of external vectorial threat that are growing and which appear to be, shall we say, produced by a hostile foreign actor in the form of the United States, which has come to represent a truly existential threat to Canada. Economically, militarily, diplomatically, socially, and culturally. When you live on the fringes of a dying empire, you are vulnerable by proxy, and that is what we're seeing right now. And the situation in Ottawa that's occurring right now, regardless of the motives of the actual perpetrator, is emblematic of this broader bureaucratic facilitation of an external takedown, not on the basis of complicity, but on the basis of pure incompetence and an unwillingness to, shall we say, embody their constitutional authority in a meaningful way. That means that the greatest threat to Canadian national security outside of the United States is the Canadian bureaucracy itself. I've been Kevin Duska. I am the president of Prime Rogue Inc. Thank you for those of you who tuned in. We probably will not be going live with this again, but feel free to drop a subscription and a like if you enjoyed this content, and check out our website where we post intelligence briefings for free on a near daily basis, as well as the Echo 12B project at echo12b.ca, and we have some other projects, but those might not be relevant for now. Thank you for tuning